everyone who is watching today, and welcome to my C# video on programming part 1. Alright, today we are just going to go over the very basics of C#. Alright, so to get started, let's go ahead and go over the first slide. What is C#? So as it says here, it's pronounced as C#, like I've said. It's a language developed by Microsoft, runs on the .NET framework. The first version was released in 2002, and C# is a very high level and very popular programming language that is used for developing many different things from websites, mobile apps, video games, and a whole lot more. So let's move on to our next slide. So some of the most popular IDEs that you can use to get started with encoding in C# are listed right here. So some of them would be Visual Studio, which is very popular in the development industry by professionals. The latest version that was released was just this year, Visual Studio 2022, and then we have Visual Studio Code, Eclipse, and then there's Notepad++. All very popular in using to develop code for C#. Alright, so let's go over and look at our syntax for a simple C# application. So right here we can see we have a using statement. This using statement is including a namespace called system. So this namespace will be used throughout our application, or no, I'm sorry, not the application, but throughout our page where the system or where that namespace is being used. So it allows us to use the classes within the namespace. So in our application, we have a namespace created, and it's called My Project. So this namespace is going to be throughout our application called My Project. And then we have a class, which is the class name is called Program. And the class, you create a class by just using the keyword class. And we'll go over more classes in probably on the fourth part of C#. So that's a little bit down the road. And then we have our main method. Our main method is our entry point of our application for any console application that we write. We have public static void main. So what public basically means is that it's an access modifier, meaning that it can be accessed from anywhere within your application or from another assembly, which you'll understand later on as we go through these tutorials. And then you'll understand static later. And then void is basically just saying that it's void and you don't have to return any type of value within this function or method. So inside the main method we have console writeline, and inside console writeline we have the text hello world. So console is a class that is being used within the system namespace, which is allowing us to use the console class. And then the console class is calling our writeline method. And then the writeline method is using hello world to print out to the screen. So in this example, we'll go ahead and I will show you an example of how that works. So in the code that I have listed up here, we have namespace practice, class program, static void main, and console writeline hello world. So to simply run that, I can go ahead and run that and start without debugging. To start without debugging, pull this over here, and we're going to have a printout called saying hello world, indicating that we have printed out that to the console. Now we don't have to do hello world. You can print out whatever you want. You can change this and we can say hello, how are you doing today? Very simple, something like that, and then we can go ahead and run without debugging again, and it's going to print out hello, how are you doing today? There you go. So it's something simple as that. We can also perform simple mathematical calculations within console writeline. So we can do something like 5 plus 6. And doing something like that is just going to print out the value of 5 plus 6, which is then 11. And it'll print out the value rather than actually printing out 5 plus 6. Now if we wanted to print out just 5 plus 6, what we can do let's put these in quotes. So anything that is listed in quotes is going to print out exactly as it's shown. So let's start without debugging again, and it's going to print out 5 plus 6, indicating that that is what it's showing here in the string. So let's go back to our slide. And we look back over here, and let's go to our next slide. This is going to show you different outputs. So console, as I was showing you in the compiler or the IDE that I was using. Console write line, hello world, or you can put how are you doing, or what's for dinner today, whatever you want inside the string. And then like I was showing, you can do simple mathematical calculations, like if you did console write line 3 plus 3, your output's going to be 6. Console write line 3 plus 3 times 9, your output will be 30, indicating you still do the order of operations. 9 times 3 is 27 plus 3, and you get 30. And this one, since it is wrapped in quotes, it's going to print out exactly as shown as 9 plus 3 rather than actually printing out the value. So that's a simple overview of how you can print out simple calculations or values to the screen. So let's go over some simple variables and data types. So over here we have an int. This is a very basic data type, but what an int allows us to do is that will allow us to store an integer type variable, indicating that you can only store whole numbers inside an integer variable, as we have down here. We have int number equals 35. That says is that 35 is the value of number, and 35 is being stored in the variable number. So number is equals 35. We cannot assign a decimal to an integer type data type because that will throw an error. An integer data type can only store a whole number, as indicated here. If we wanted to store a decimal, we can use the double data type. That stores floating point variables, or decimals or fractional type variables, as indicated down here. So we have double, which is our data type, our variable name, indicated right here. We do data type variable name equals the value. So we have second number, which is our variable name, equals 25.6. So now here we can do a simple decimal since it is a double. One of the other data types is char, stores single characters. Char is short for character, indicating that we can store a single character. Char is the data type, my char is the variable name, equals s. When you use the char data type, you must indicate that the s has to be, or that any character that you use has to be in single quotes for it to work, otherwise you're going to get an error. Alright, and then we have string. Now that's going to store any type of text, such as a phrase or whatever you want to put in a string, as we showed you with console write line. So string, my string equals hello, nice day today. That's going to print out exactly as shown here if we indicated that inside console write line. And then we have bool, which is true or false values. Bool, my bool equals true. So if we go over here, console write line, and we just put number in console write line, not in quotes, just the variable number, it's going to print out 35. Do second number, as indicated here, we'll get 25.6. My char, we're going to get s, string, we're going to print out the text that's shown here, and then my bool is going to print out true. So let's show some examples over here in code. So let's say I did some basic variable types. My number equals 35, and then every statement must have a semicolon at the end. Make sure that that is done, otherwise you'll get an error. And then you can have double equals my double, like my double equals 25.6. My fault, we don't need that equal sign there. Let's go through an error. My double equals 25.6. And notice how there's green lines here. That's just indicating that the variable that I've declared has not been used yet. Char, my char equals, in quotes, and then so forth. Even with the other variables, it's going to indicate the same way. So let's go ahead and do console writeLine, and we're going to print out my number. That should print out exactly what is initialized as my number, which is 35. So let's go ahead and start without debugging, and my number is going to indicate 35 once that console screen pops up. There we go, we have 35. And now we can do the same with some other ones as well. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. No. Alright. And then we can put my double in here. Double, and then we put my char in here. Notice as I put this in here, the green underline disappears, indicating that it is now being used. Let's save it. Start without debugging, and then we're going to have 35, 25.6, and then S, indicating, I know it's a little hard to see, but you'll have that up there, indicated that it did work. And you guys can follow along definitely as you go through the video in your own compiler that you're using. Alright, so that's basically a few data types and variables. So let's go back to our slide, and we're going to go on to a few more on data types. So like we discussed, the int is going to store whole numbers, but it's going to store a whole number anywhere between this range. So you cannot store a number that is outside this range, otherwise you're going to get an error. This is the type of number that an integer can store. And then we have long, that's going to store an even bigger number out of this range. That's if we have to store like just a very massive number, you're going to use the long data type to do that. And then double, like I've said, it's going to store fractional numbers or decimals up to 15 decimal digits. And then we have float, which is similar to double, but it's going to only store from 6 to 7 decimal digits. And then we have bool, which is going to store true or false. Char is going to store a single character wrapped in single quotes, where a string is going to store a sequence of characters wrapped in double quotes, as I've showed you in the compiler. Now let's say we want to get user input. Now to do that, we're going to use console readLine. So let's say we have console writeLine, please enter your name. Now it's asking you to enter your name. Let's go ahead and do that over here. We're going to write console writeLine, please enter your name. Oops. Please enter your name. And then here we can do a string name equals console readLine. Okay, readLine is gonna return a string type variable. So when it asks you what is your name, the system is going to pause and it's going to allow you to enter a name using console readLine. The name that you entered will then be stored in this name variable, which you then can use in console readLine to print that out. So let's say save, debug. So we'll start without debugging. We're not going to debug it. No D2. And it's going to ask, what is your name? Please enter your name. So if I just go ahead and enter any name, we'll do it. And then it's going to print out James. Or you can do something like nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And then it's going to say nice to meet you, James, or whatever name I put in there. So it doesn't have to be that, it can be whatever. We can do John. We'll do John. And then it's going to print out nice to meet you, John. Oh, it just says nice to meet you. That's why because I forgot to put in, you got to put in the plus sign in there. The plus sign is going to indicate that it's going to put these two together, the string and the name. So let's go back to debug, go back, enter your name, and then it says nice to meet you, John. So that's basically getting user input, and you don't have to use a string. We can use a integer, or we can use something else other than a string, which I'll show you how to do that right now. So if you wanted to use something else other than a string, you do something like this. You do int, let's say we wanted to get their age. Int age equals, we do convert to int 32. So what's that doing is that's converting what we're writing in here to an integer value. So let's go back to our compiler, and we can say console write line how old are you? And now we can go ahead and put age in here. So we're going to do int age equals convert, be right there for you, to int 32. And then inside here we're going to put console read line, indicating that we're going to turn whatever we write to an integer. So what that's indicating is it's going to ask me my name again, because that's still up there. I'm sorry, let me do one more thing real quick. We're going to put a console write line your age is, no, your age is, and then we'll do that. Your age is, get your age. Now we'll run it again. And now it's going to play, please enter, gotta run again. So please enter your name, we'll enter John. It says nice to meet you, John. Now it's going to ask you how old are you. So in here I can just put 35, and then it's going to say or built errors. So what this is telling me is that we have built errors in the code. So in order to check the errors, we can do that, and we can go in here and check our errors. So this is basically saying that used by another process. I think the error was just because I ran it twice. Let's do that again. There it goes, there it goes. Alright, that was probably because I ran it twice at the same time. Alright, so John, and then we just put the name, and then it's going to say your age is 35. Your age is 35. Alright, so, and then that's basically to get user input, and you can actually, write that to the screen. So let's go back to our slideshow. And that's basically user input. Alright, so operators. Let's talk about operators. So there's quite a few different operators that are used to perform mathematical calculations within your application. So you have basically addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. I'm sure all of you probably know what those are. Then you have the modulus symbol, which is a parenthesis symbol. What that does is that's going to return the division remainder. So for example, if you're doing like I don't know, 11 divide 5. 5 goes into 10 twice with a remainder of 1, so that would print out a 1 to the console if you were doing like 11 divide 5, is what the modulus symbol is going to do. And then you have double plus sign, which is an increment, increases the value of a variable by 1, and then that will decrease it by 1, and then that's an assignment operator, which you guys have already seen from the code when you assign a value to a variable. More on operators. Alright, so now we have our comparison operators. So this is going to compare two values. So if you have a variable that equals, say, 5, and then you have another variable that equals 10, you can use this comparison operator to compare the values to see if they're equal to each other or not. And if it is equal, then it's going to return true. If not, then it will be false. This right here is a not equal. So this is going to check to see if the values are not equal to each other. So exclamation is not, and then not equal. And then this is greater than, less than, greater than equal to, or less than equal to are some of the comparison operators. So let me go ahead and show you a few examples of comparison operators. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and delete what I have. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out. Let me show you how to do that. You can comment this out, and then it turns green, and what that does is that's going to get ignored by the compiler, so all that code gets ignored. Now I can do something like console write line to show you an example. 15 is greater than 10. Whoops. Now all that's going to do is that's going to print us out an either true or false answer. Is 15 greater than 10? And then that's going to say true because it is greater than 10. So that's an example of what's going to happen if you put in those values. So let's go ahead and go back to our slideshow. Close that out. So, and that's the same with these greater, equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to. Now we have the logical operators. The double and symbol is going to return true if both statements are true. And then we have or is going to return true if one of the statements is true, and then we have not returns false if the statement is true, or if the result is true. And you'll learn more about these in the coming lessons. Alright, our last slide here for our basic lesson. It's going to be examples on using strings. So this is string concatenation, which allows this to combine two strings together. So right here we have string first name equals John, string last name equals Doe, string full name equals first name plus last name. So what that is doing is that's combining the two strings together. Console write line equals full name, and then that's going to output John Doe because it's putting both of them together to output the full name. And then you have access strings as well, which is string my string equals hello. Let's say you wanted to access just the letter H. You can do my string 0 in brackets. That's going to give us the index H inside hello. So let's say if we wanted to get the first L, we would put 2 inside the brackets because it starts at 0. So H is 0, E is 1, first L is 2, second L is 3, and O is 4. And then we have combining two numbers together, adding two strings. So string x equals 55, or string y equals 31, string z equals x plus y, z will be 55, 31. It's not going to add those two strings together because they're in quotes and the strings. It's just going to combine them together, and it's not going to give you a mathematical calculation unless you convert both of them back to an integer. Let me show you a quick example of that in the compiler. So let's say if we had a string number equals 55, string second equals 32. And now inside here we can go ahead and do x equals number plus second. And then we can do console write line x. And then that will print out combining those two strings together. Let's say And then we have 5532 as it combines the two strings together. I'm sorry, very small to see, but you can practice that in your compiler as well. Alright, so that's going to complete the first lesson today on the basics of C# programming. The next lesson should be coming up pretty soon, and that's going to be on C# part 2 is going to be on looping arrays and conditionals. Good luck, guys. Thank you.